Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name's Brian, and in this video we're going to talk about Feora 3 in the Hearts of Darkness theme force for Infernals. So it's been a while since I've put out a Warmachine video, and it's not to say that my desire to play has lessened at all, it's just that I've been trying to learn the Infernal army in general, and I figured it would be a little while before I could talk about it and feel like I was coming from a position of understanding. But I've been throwing down a bunch of games. I've got like my Warmachine legs back again to where I can play the game and not have to refer to rules for a bunch of things or try to remember all the stats for all my models. I've kind of got the gist of it. So we do have locally some Khador players that are new, so when that happens, I like to kind of pivot off of the factions that they're playing so they can just kind of experience them on their own, and then I don't overcrowd the group with a particular faction. So I decided to go to Infernals, even though we did have one of those players, but I really wanted to learn the army so that I could learn how to play against it, and for me that's, the way that I do it is I play the faction and understand it better that way. So the gist with Infernals was that I got into them late, I think the newest release that was yet to come out was like Runewood 2, so they'd been out for a while, but I hadn't really done anything with them or looked at them all that much. I think I played against them once in a tournament, had no idea what they did, but I got to play into Hearts of Darkness with Kara Sloan, so it wasn't like it was a difficult game to figure out because she just does the same thing she's been doing for the last 10 years. But I wanted to understand the rest of this faction, so I signed up for the Adepticon Champions event, and unfortunately that isn't going to happen, or didn't happen, but it didn't mean that I didn't get any games in with these lists. I basically, for every steamroller that had come up leading to that event, was with my champions pairing of Omodemos and Feora 3. And the reason why I'd picked Feora 3 for my Hearts of Darkness list was that I felt like Gaston 2 and any Dark Legacy list are going to kind of have the same blind spots in the champions setup, so I figured Feora 3 would be the best one to bring in so that if someone was dropping an anti-Infernals list without really understanding how Feora 3 works, that I would be in a pretty decent position to be able to make that game better. So let's first go into the Hearts of Darkness theme force and see what kind of benefits we're going to get out of it, and that'll maybe help us figure how we're going to tilt the list build a little bit. The Hearts of Darkness theme force can get a little complicated looking when you see it for the first time, especially if you're new to Infernals in general, but the gist is that you get a very specific list of warcasters to pick from, and then from there, once you pick the warcaster you want to go with, you can select any number of non-character warjacks from their faction. This doesn't mean you can't bring their character warjacks, it just means you can't bring like Fire of Salvation with Feora or something like that. You do get access to up to 2 non-partisan units from the faction that the warcaster's from, and then the last building bit is that you can get up to 3 non-partisan, non-Archon solos from the faction that you've selected as well. In terms of the rest of the benefits, that list gets a little long too, and I mean benefits are more like the special rules, right? So the big ones are all models in this army are considered infernal models. Then you also, all your warjacks gain accumulator soulless, and the last bit that we take advantage of is that you can start the game with your upkeeps on friendly models. We don't take advantage of the Wretch bonus in this list because I just don't have them in here, but they do gain access to another spell if that's something you want to work in. Looking at just the front of Feora's card kind of makes you think that she is a frontline caster because she's got the stats to back it up. I mean, she's 14-18 with 18 boxes, she's got 6 focus, and she's got a relatively decent combat weapon with the stats to use it, and she has a 10-inch spray, which is huge. And given that she has assault, it makes you think that she wants to be up there doing a bunch of stuff all the time and just exist on those front lines for the rest of the game. And the abilities that she comes with don't seem to change her mind too much on that. She's got reposition, which is great, but it's, most cavalry have this, or all cavalry have this. Flame Trail is if she bumps into something, she sets it on fire, which is just another thing that makes you think that she wants to be up on the front fields. But when we get over to her spell list, we see there's a lot of business on here that makes it hard for her to exist up there and remain safe with just her base stats, because we're usually going to be camping 1 or 0 focus almost every turn if we're getting a lot of work out of her spell list. She has Banishing Ward, which is great for this army because she gets to start with that upkeep out for free. So it just means that she doesn't need to be plagued by casting it at an inopportune time, or getting or not being able to be extremely aggressive on turn 1, in that she can unpack, the 16 inches or whatever that she would want to early, because we get to start with it out for free. The next spell that she has is Fire Step. Now this one, it's a movement, or it's a threat extender plus a little bit of damage boost on there. But Fire Step for me, I end up using it more to get me out of a frustrating situation, or I guess what I should probably just say is that Fire Step's extremely situational, and I don't think I ever really plug this into my normal game plan with Feora 3. Now, Insight is one of the big benefits that I see for Feora 3. It's basically the main reason why I'm taking her for this theme force at all. And it allows models that are attacking something that is in her command area to get +2 to the attack and damage rolls. So it's not that the model attacking needs to be in there, it's the model that's getting attacked needs to be in that 9-inch bubble. And 9 inches it's not a big area when you really think about it. So when you're using this spell, you kind of want the world to die in that 9 inches, or you want the game to end at that point. Because afterwards, putting up Insight, you're not going to have a ton of protection to keep you safe. So Insight, it's not that it gets used sparingly, it gets used a lot in this list. It's just that Insight is... you want to be destroying everything that's anywhere near threatening Feora from that distance. Next up, she has Molten Metal, which is a decent damage spell if you're going into a high armor warjack, because they're just going to be taking points of damage no matter what. The thing is it's difficult to find the extra focus to be throwing this spell out there. So again, it's kind of like Fire Step. It's situational, and when it's good, but for the most part, it's not really doing much for me. The last thing that she has is Redline, another upkeep spell that we get to start out with for free, but it's going to give a Jack a speed buff and a strength buff, and then they'll be able to get some more focus economy out of what you put on them, because they can charge and make power attacks without having to spend that focus. They take damage every turn they do something with this, but it's not the biggest problem with the way that we're going to be building the list out. Now, Feora's feat is quite legit. I think when people look at it, it seems really bland and maybe a little bit lazy. I kind of always had that thought when we've seen feats that just say cast this spell for free. But for Feora, it's a pretty big deal because she casts Insight for free, and then while in her control range, her friendly faction models get Flame Trail, which is that bump into things and set them on fire, which isn't the biggest deal in the universe for this list or for her in general. It's something that's definitely good to keep in mind for when, if your plan doesn't go completely the way you want it to, and you've got a few things that are left on fire, then you at least have that going for you. But that's kind of Feora 3 in a nutshell. And with looking at all the pieces of Feora 3, she's a little bit difficult to work with because she wants to be up there doing a lot of work, but she needs to destroy just about everything that could threaten her because she's going to be pretty vulnerable. Now, the thing that makes her nice in Hearts of Darkness is that the Infernals have access to a lot of models that can protect you and get you through some of those more shaky times. But in order to kind of put forward this idea of destroying everything that's in Feora's Insight range, the Warjack we're bringing with her is Adjudicator. So we've got tons of attacks coming from this thing, and it's a great target for Redline. Now, I know that the reasoning for the Adjudicator in this list isn't a whole lot different from what it was in the Vlad 3 list. I mean, Vlad 3 gave him an additional die on top of the reliquary that's built into the Judicator already, but we're going to be getting Insight with Feora, which is roughly the same thing, I think, when you talk about what an extra die dropping lowest does versus having just a +2 buff. But we get, I think we get 4 AoE 3s that come out of the Judicator, so you don't have a lot of control over the other 2 that pop out from him, but we also get a couple more spray 10s, so we can put a lot of pressure on that Insight range. And when we put Redline on the Judicator, we're really buffing up a ton of stats, so they kind of have this big 12-inch no-fly zone because we go up to speed 7, we can charge 10, and then threat 2 inches with our melee. So there's the 12-inch, don't come here unless you plan on killing my caster or my Judicator, because if you do put something there, it will probably die from the Judicator. Because we're already sitting at POW 21 with the fists, Redline will take us up to POW 23, and we have a lot of other strength buffs in here and armor debuffs that are going to make that number even higher for the Judicator. So I feel like this is where probably the most discussion can happen with Feora 3 is in her battle group, because I think with Insight and a little bit more spread out footprint with things like Hand of Judgment and then some other Menoth Warjacks you want to put in here, you could make this list work really well. But for me, since Feora has a little bit more of a difficult time getting the focus out where she wants it and when she wants it, I feel like having just the Judicator works well for me. And it does really take care of everything. I think the Judicator is probably the most well-rounded Colossal that is out there right now. If there's high defense infantry, you don't have a ton of problems because you've got the big AoEs and the additional die, so you don't need to worry about boosting your damage. And if you're looking at a couple really solid hard heavies, then you can just charge them with the Judicator from a foot away, and usually one round one, but maybe even 2 heavies that are being a problem for you. It's just that in a world of Redline plus Insight, we're looking at POW 25 right now, and that's, again, without the rest of the buffs that we're bringing to the list, so there's just a ton of work that the Judicator can put out, makes him the perfect candidate for Feora's battle group. The next model we're reaching for is going to be the first of our Menoth solos, and that's Sevi Zero. The main reason we're bringing Sevi Zero is for the Eye of Menoth ability. Since the Hearts of Darkness theme makes every model in our army infernal, that means that Eye of Menoth is going to apply to infernal models. So we get this cool buff from Insight, and then we can layer the Sevi's control range on top of that, which is 10 inches, pretty big for a journeyman, and get another +1 on top of that. We aren't building his battle group to try and take advantage of Mystic Wards or Road to War. We're really just honing in on bringing in Eye of Menoth to make our stuff that much more potent when we're being aggressive. It doesn't go without saying that Immolation gets pretty dangerous with Insight and Eye of Menoth going up. We're talking about throwing POW 15s around, and those can be helpful when you're going in for that assassination run, or if you're trying to get some models out of a zone. Sevi Zero can do that. He also is speed 6, so he's pretty quick for a little Warcaster. And when you've got Insight and Eye of Menoth buffed on him again, he goes up to Mat 8 POW 15, so that can catch people off guard too, because Sevi's kind of always had this idea built around him that he's just a support bot and doesn't really do much on his own. But with those buffs, Sevi can get pretty dangerous and catch people by surprise if something comes up. The Jack we're bringing, I really went low points on this one, and I didn't feel like I needed any more ranged output from Sevi Zero because I have the Judicator already, and that's throwing out a ton of sprays and templates, so I decided to grab for a Purifier. This makes it just a 14-point investment for having Eye of Menoth, and the Purifier itself has done a decent amount of work for me in the games that I've played. With Ashen Veil, we go up to defense 15. We're immune to fire, so we got a few other tricks in this list that can help play into that. But most importantly, we're bringing along chain weapons for him too. And I kind of wanted this list to play into flames, so that seems like a decent one if you're going into a bunch of precursors or something like that. You can get around these shields with the low armor infantry, so it gets into like really crushing range for the purifier. He's just all around a pretty decent jack, and if anything, he's just a really hard to remove piece from a zone and can clear some stuff out on his own. Next up, I'm bringing Great Princess Regna Gravnoy, and just like Sevi, I'm not bringing her specifically for some of the tools that she usually brings to an Infernal list. I'm really bringing her for decel, and that's about it. She does have the ability to summon a Shrieker that can really hurt some of our opponent's activation order, or it could really just cripple a unit if they don't have a way to get around it. But that isn't my main focus for her. I mean, it gets a gun on the table, which is cool, and we can allocate to it to keep it around and still be able to put up decel. But for the most part, she solely exists to put up decel when we need it. And that helps keep Feora and the Judicator a little bit padded from some ranged fire that they might take on, because they are going to get quite aggressive and be far up the table. So decel is a no-brainer for this one, but it doesn't mean that there aren't a few other things we can get out of her that make her a valuable piece for us. Next up, I've added one Umbral Guardian to this list, and I do end up putting this in the Shadow Guardian mode more so than actually deploying it. It's just a piece that's solely there to keep Feora 3 from getting into too much trouble. If my opponent doesn't have a lot of shooting, then I'm not too worried about it. But the ability to pop this out and stop your opponent from getting a charge that they might want is really nice. But it's sometimes, the more people play against Infernals, the more they kind of notice this trick. So it's not something you get to take full advantage of. But it is worth at least having in there if you think that you can catch an opponent off guard if they feel like they can get Feora real easy, especially if they've played against her before outside of Infernals, because I think in Menoth or Warriors of the Old Faith with Khador, I think that Feora is kind of seen as like low-hanging fruit for assassination because she does play so far forward and doesn't have like the most amazing stats in the universe, but the Umbral Guardian can help out with that a little bit just by being able to pop out and body block something. She's also decent at keeping Sevi 0 around if you really need to, but for the most part she is solely there for keeping Feora 3 safe. Now we come up to our second Menoth solo for the list, and that's going to be the Vassal of Menoth. And the reason why I bring this one is that I want to try and free up as much focus as I can from Feora 3. I want her to be able to safely cast Insight when it's not her feat turn, or at least be able to do some other things that she would like to, like juggle banishing board, or make some attacks, or boost some damage rolls, or use Fire Step to get into or out of weird situations. But the Vassal of Menoth in combination with the Accumulator Soulless means that our Judicator is going to be full up every turn as long as we have things in the right position. And that's going to be a huge thing for the output that we can generate, and it'll be big for Feora in terms of helping her stay alive and maybe camp a little bit extra. Other than that, the Vassal serves no real purpose other than maybe contesting, but he is just going to be following around the Judicator like they usually do. Valen Hawk's coming along in this list with us, and if you've played any other faction that has easy access to Tactician, you know that it's a really great tool. It's not one you want to crutch on, but it's great to have it, especially when you have a large base caster and a Colossal running around. You don't have to worry about clearing things out of their way if your order of activations gets all funky. But the biggest reason for having Valen, not that Tactician isn't a big reason, is that he makes Infernal models immune to knockdown and stationary, and that includes Feora 3. So we've taken a caster that likes to be on the front lines, but once she's done everything she wants to, doesn't have as much defensive prowess up there, and we've given it to her by having that Umbral Guardian in there and adding in Valen Hawk. The other model I've added, which you could kind of take it or leave it, is Eilish Garrity. Mostly and this is Eilish Garrity the Darkseeker, not Eilish 1. So I added him in here just because I wanted a good... I wanted Puppet Master running around, and sometimes, since this list is a little bit more focused on assassination, having the ability to throw out Hex Blast, especially since we have all these buffs, and then he's got Signs Importance built into his spells as well, we can get a little bit extra damage or shake an upkeep that's not going to be super helpful for us in trying to actualize that goal. But in general, Eilish is kind of wishy-washy here. It's mostly for a couple buffs and the potential use for Hex Blast, but this could easily come out if Eilish just isn't your flavor. I've added the Hermit of Henchhold to this list as well, and there's a lot of things that make the Hermit attractive that we really lose in this list. We're running all Infernal models, so we don't get to stop the damage roll off of Mad Visions, and we don't have anything in terms of Horrors or Masters outside of Regna and the occasional Shrieker she might be bringing in, or Lamenter if the situation calls for it. I'm not against you doing that at all. But the big reason for having the Hermit here is for Word of Ruin, so we can get another damage debuff out there, and just having another solo that's difficult to get rid of, so we can park it on a flag or in a zone just to make sure that we're not losing out on scenario, or at least give us the potential to win on scenario after clearing it off with a lot of our other pieces. One of the things I've noticed about this list as I've played it more is it's difficult to get the Hermit into the effective place to kind of layer every buff on with Word of Ruin. So he's been put into the boat of possibly coming out of the list, but I'm having a really difficult time based on how the playtesting has gone for me with the Hermit to want to do that, because at worst he ends up moving that debuff elsewhere where maybe Feora and Sevi Zero aren't getting the most, or aren't applying their buff, so you kind of have another area here of a debuff that can serve you some benefit. So for right now, the Hermit stays in the list for me, but I can see the rest of the list outpacing him and kind of making him irrelevant. So if this was something you wanted to remove, I wouldn't look at you sideways for it or anything. It's just, for me, the Hermit works for the way that I apply it. The last Menoth solo that we're bringing in this list is a Rack. And unfortunately with the Racks, you can only bring the one. It doesn't open up the full availability of them for you. But the Rack is just another way for Feora to get some more focus, to do the things she wants to, and have some hanging around. There's not a whole lot to be said about this one. It's specifically why it's in here, is just to get that focus. Next up is Runewood 2. And Runewood 2 is really... he's a sweet solo. He's got a hand cannon on him with not bad stats after we've layered all the buffs on him, and his melee output isn't terrible either. We've got a model that can apply Grievous Wounds if it's something that we need to have out there. But when we look at the insidious plans that Runewood 2 brings, we don't really see a whole lot that we can take advantage of here. I mean, the Valley of Woe doesn't seem like a big deal. It's another one of those, it's cool when it can work, but otherwise it's kind of just, there. But the intelligence is a really big deal, because with this list I would like to get first turn, because running Adjudicator 14 inches can kind of make people shake in their boots a little bit. It's just the way it is. I mean, you don't expect something that big to be that fast. I mean, people are probably used to it with seeing a Vulcan every now and again, but with the Adjudicator, getting that turn one really helps. It kind of helps you establish where the battle's going to happen and can kind of force your opponent to do things they don't really want to at the time they don't want to. So I'm thinking like Feora or Fiona's feat, where she'll just end up feeding on the bottom of one in hopes that you don't burn her entire army down with the Adjudicator, and that she doesn't become extremely irrelevant on scenario. But the big reason for bringing Runewood in this list is Shadow. This allows you to kind of have Runewood running up around Feora 3, and then you can mark a model with Shadow that is a little bit more threatening to Feora, and this way it's going to come in, do its one hit, and then she gets to back out of the way. It's not going to be the end of the world for her. It just is a way to keep her, another way to keep her safe. So you can kind of get the gist of what we've been doing with the solos so far, is that we're really building this list to either increase damage output or keep Feora 3 alive. And the next unit that we're bringing doesn't chase too far off of that directive, we're bringing in a min unit of Choir, and I didn't want to max this one because I didn't feel like it was threatened enough to need the max members, and I didn't feel like I needed to make sure that the Purifier was always going to get whatever buff they were calling for. Mostly this unit exists to follow around the Judicator and make sure that it gets battle or passage or shielding or whatever it needs for that turn. But the Purifier, I at least try to keep the Choir and the Purifier at least somewhat close to each other so that if that buff is going to be relevant for the Purifier, that I can get that out there as well. But mostly these guys are just holding the back line and doing what Choir do and make the Judicator dangerous. The last Menoth unit that we're bringing along are a max unit of Flame Guard Cleansers. We brought the unit attachment with them as well, so we're going to get that once per game ranged or spray 10 with the mini feat that they bring. They also get Assault out of the unit attachment, so we end up getting a 16-inch threat range when they are not under mini feat, and then that goes up to 18 inches when they are. The whole unit is immune to fire, so they end up becoming little spray beacons for themselves if there's something kind of in like that you can't target, or something that's kind of wrapped around something that you can't quite see with a flamer. You know, you can do your assault orders and run one around. You've also got Feora 3 being immune to fire. The Purifier is immune to fire, so you've got some good spray beacons that you can use for this. But with Insight, the Rat of 5 doesn't really hurt you all that much. You can hit quite a bit, especially when you start layering on the Eye of Menoth buff as well. We're shooting at a Rat of 8 at that point, and the POW 12 goes up to POW 15. So that's kind of the theme here for most of our do work units, is everything goes up to POW 15, Rat 8, or Mat 8. So these guys can do quite a bit of work with those sprays. If you're playing against a lot of infantry, you really don't care how much of it you're missing because you're bound to hit something. Even on average, you're hitting a 15. So it's not too out of the question to pop a couple 16s here and there, and with that many sprays, you should be able to burn a whole area down. As I said, most of the time I've played this list, it hasn't been into the most ideal matchups for me, so these guys haven't gotten a chance to shine just yet, and I think the one time that I played into Flames, I ended up getting them really early with the Judicator, so these guys didn't really get to put on much of a show either. But I could see with all the sprays this unit brings and how much time it costs me to put all of them out there, you could probably min this unit and change a few things in the list if you wanted to. But that's the nice thing about this list so far, is that I've given a lot of pieces that help me get closer to my overall end goal with it, but there are definitely ways that you can kind of tinker with it. And one of the ways that you could be tinkering with it is with the Solus unit I've decided to bring. So for the final 8 points in the list, we're bringing a min unit of Grievers. So they've got a lot of really cool abilities that are beneficial to this list, but it takes their POW 12s up again to POW 15. And since they've got Eyeless Sight, they're taking care of those stealth units. They can combine ranged, but for the most part, you want to make sure that you've at least got one of these things around so that you can make sure that your Adjudicator at least is getting the accumulator bonus. We do have another Solus model in the Umbral Guardian that we bring along with us, but depending on how you deploy that, you might not be able to get the accumulator when you want it to. So the Griever unit can do a lot of work with all of the buffs that we've brought, but you want to make sure that you're unpacking them appropriately, because the accumulator Solus is a really big deal for this list. Another potential option for this is to build in a unit of Howlers. I know that they're not really high on a lot of Infernal players' radar right now, but I think with this list particularly, getting up to like Mat 11 with them and having Berserk is a really big deal. You could take out a big swath of high defense troops, which might be harder for some, which might be what people bring against you as a Infernal player because they think you might choke on them a little bit. But again, there's a lot of room for customizing this list, but I think it's a good way to go with Feora to play into that assassination game. So we've talked a lot about all the different buffs that we have in here, but we haven't actually done the math yet on how threatening the Judicator can actually be. So the Judicator starts out at POW 21. Feora's Insight takes him up to POW 23. Then Redline layered on top of that takes it up to POW 25. Then when we get Eye of Menoth in there, we're going up to POW 26. Then if we happen to get them in Word of Ruin, that makes it POW 28 essentially. And then if we get Battle from the Choir, we go up to POW 30. So basically anything the Judicator touches just crumbles. So that's one of the things where I think when people look at this list as you're playing against them, unless they're familiar with what you're trying to do, they don't necessarily understand or compute how difficult it can be to work around this Judicator. We're talking about threatening 12 inches for free off that charge, then having Reliquary built into it, and getting up to POW 30. There's really very little that the Judicator can get into that he won't kill. I think that if you even go into 3 heavies, you're likely to maybe kill them. And maybe that's a little bit of a stretch. For sure he kills 2 heavies, but essentially anything in melee he can tear down pretty easily. I think even it might get dicey on like a striker 1-feeted colossal with Arcane Shield, but we have Arcane Blast from Eilish, so we can get that Arcane Shield. We can get Arcane Shield off of there, but beyond that, I think that it's not completely unheard of that the Judicator just takes that down. So this is a fun experiment to go through the math and get the buffs layered on there, and then actually see your opponent's face when they see how far the Judicator threatens and how much damage it's actually doing. So if you have the pieces and are really eager to try out a Feora 3 list like this, give it a shot and let me know in the comments below how you've decided to kind of alter the list. As I said, I'm not completely married to the way that this list is built out. There's a lot of changes that I could see made, and I really do want to put Howlers in here. It's just that I've got to make sure that I pull the right tweaks, because that offers me another Soulless unit and something that can hold some zones. So now instead of having a Dark Legacy list that's not super great on scenario and having nothing to go with it, I have this other list that can actually put some scenario pressure out there and always threaten this ridiculous long assassination with a Warjack that will just touch your Warcaster's face and boot it across the map. If you enjoyed this list discussion, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I do want to crank out more Warmachine content here, and not just all the Ice and Fire stuff. I feel like I've gotten back up to where I used to be in terms of functionality with Warmachine, to where I can talk about it with more confidence and not mess things up, or actually engage in a battle report and not make it an excruciating experience for everyone involved. But given the circumstance that we currently find ourselves in, that battle reports are just not going to be happening right now, and I don't think that doing them on Vassal or Tabletop Simulator is something that I really want to venture into at this moment. So it's going to be mostly list discussions or talking about new releases. I do want to fold in some painting tutorials, but I don't really have a direction on what to do for Warmachine in terms of painting tutorials. So if there's something that you particularly want to see coming out on Warmachine or Hordes models, leave it in the comments below so I can kind of get a direction on what people are wanting to see. And the more people keep coming over and watching these Warmachine videos, the more of it I'll be able to crank out there. So I hope you enjoyed this and look forward to making the next video for you, and hoping you stick around for it.